Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, saha viryam karavavahai, tejasvinavaditam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily argue with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So as I said previously, we just concluded a retreat a few days ago, and the theme was exactly that, the path to joy. And as I said earlier, it seems that of all the various impulses that we would want, power and wealth, it seems to be that the undying happiness is, an unconditional happiness is really the thing that we are most looking for. Now there's a useful passage in the Kathopanishad. Indriyanam pratak bhavam udayastamayo chayat pratak utmartamaya mannan matvadira nashochati. The senses and their rising and setting are different. The divine is different. Knowing this, the wise one grieves no more. And the commentator will ask us, what is that to be known? What is the need of this knowledge? So how is he to be known? What is the need of his knowledge? But that's being answered. And many passages in the Upanishads will be concerned with this theme of happiness. And so, knowing this, the wise one grieves no more. Now we're constantly grieving. There's a science to grieving, and most grieving occurs when we think of grieving, we're thinking of bereavements. We're thinking of people dying. And so, immediately, death is naturally the thing that we assume will end all our happiness. And our happiness is derived, of course, from close associations with relatives. It is formed from things that we possess. But in short, it's connected to the external world. And what connects us to the external world, of course, are the sense organs. So the senses have their rising and their setting. But one thing we should know is that there is a difference between the fundamental one that is seeing and the instrumentation with which we are seeing. And so we can consider a kind of outer layer of all the senses, eyes, ears, and so on, that are all based on the external part of the skin. And they make us aware of the world in front, which flows out to the objects, and consciousness, that is our birthright, is flowing out through these windows, as it were, and giving us the information that we require about a kind of world which changes and gives us the illusion that it doesn't change. It's a remarkable thing. We put great store against it. And yet, these senses will set. And we know that they set every night. A kind of gliding effect takes place, experience takes place. We hardly notice it. Where the external senses close, we can say the eyes close, and the internal sense organs remain alive and well, and we can see things in dreams, or we can even see things in our imagination. Now, if you understand this well, you might characterize death as simply closing the eyes. When the eyes are closed, well, all the other things remain. All the world of the senses continues, and so one set of senses has set, and we can say the other one rises. But you see, when even those set, we have a kind of condition of peace. And so, all the daily activities that we find which are attractive, let's say to the eyes, bring us beautiful pictures, the ears bring us wonderful praise. Internally, we're not happy when we don't see the things we want or like. And when we hear blame or criticism instead of praise. But this consciousness that is continuously flowing, can it be stayed for a while? And if so, will it give us this poise of joy and contentment that we're looking for? And this passage in the Katha Upanishad tells us, yes. It says, if you know, first of all, that the fundamental essence in you is different from the senses and what they produce, all the objects outside. If you are aware of this difference, and you're also aware of their behavior of rising and setting, then all your grief will go. And so the question is there some scientific process that can put all the senses in your pocket, as it were, and consolidate in a central position? Can the attention be withdrawn? And can it be employed elsewhere into something which is steady and permanent? Is there such a system like that? And that would be the answer then to the question, which is, how is this to be known? And then what's the use of it? If spirituality has no other purpose but to give us regulations, a kind of set of laws, immutable laws that cannot be changed or questioned, then it looks like that's another source of unhappiness for us. Because at some point in time, we'll stop and we'll say, wait. Any effort toward progress, any struggle that we make, if it's not really going to give me any fundamental change in my life, what's the use of it? If I'm using the same old formulas that I'm always using, and I'm not getting what I want, namely this eternal happiness, well then something's wrong. At some point or other, I have to make a decision. Let us see if we can shift to another position. Let's be a little bit more observant. And when we are more observant, we'll see all our problems come from the objects revealed by the senses and our reactions to them. So is there a different way of thinking? And separately produced from the basic energy is what the passage is telling us, which means that God's will or creative power, whose first wave system will bifurcate into two areas. It will bifurcate into all the instruments that can catch what we are seeing, but it will also result in some subtle waves. Now, pretty much every time I give a talk, I try to steer people toward the fundamental underlying waves which are there. Because we have the opportunity then of taking any subject we like and saying there's a clue, there's an indicator that something more subtle is behind it, and something is more subtle behind that, and so it goes on. Until ultimately we come to a one single cosmic mind from where everything else comes. And we can do it progressively. We can do it deliberately and intensively through the process of meditation. And if we can get used to that idea, if we can get used to the idea that these fundamental subtle forces are there, bifurcating each time into the organs that register them and the wave itself, if we can repeat that 100,000 times and get used to the principle, then we will see that maybe grief will go. And if grief goes, what will be left there? You see, to say that grief is no more doesn't also mean to say that you'll get joy. Now, joy is something a little extra. So already in a small discussion before we started recording, yes, everybody is aware of happiness and everybody is pursuing it. And nobody says, my goal is to be unhappy. This much we know. But there are moments which are much more joyful than others. And when we see what made these moments, it's characteristic by an attitude of non-ownership. We don't have to own it. If we admire a beautiful scenery, let us say a beautiful mountain scenery with snow and fields and forests and so on, it's not that we want to capture it and put it in our pocket and take it home. We may wish to take a replica of it by taking a photograph. And the photograph, by the way, may also remove us from the actual experience. Because from a photograph, you can't smell the scent of pines in the air, for example, or feel the chill of the wind, or feel, the freshness of the air, or touch the grass. None of these are available from a mere picture. But we can make a recording of it internally. This we can file away in our memory and bring it out when we choose. And then we can recall and replicate all of the senses that we had. And these are the internal sense organs. The outer ones, they set. The inner ones can rise. There's a rising and setting. So when we talk about the normal existence where we're trying to pursue happiness, it's really a waking world, which is a series of waves, concretized, made concrete so that the senses can pick it up, but are really just the culmination, the final expression of some subtle waves that lie beneath it and combine and recombine. And these are not just ordinary waves, these are divine waves. These are waves that are waves of divine grace flowing to us. That means the whole world is flooded with it. And when we catch it then, when we get a rapture, internal rapture, that is even more than the feeling of joy and freedom when we look at a beautiful scene in nature. Can we not replicate that everywhere we look? Do we really require a special scene to do it? Or can we see it in everything, in every name, in every form? Can we see it in every expression that the eyes see, that the ear hears, and so on? And we have this capacity for attention. Fortunately, if we know 100 songs, we don't really have the capacity to sing them all in an instant. We have to make sure that we put time to its good use, and we can repeat each note at a time, can repeat each word at a time. Otherwise, everything becomes a jumble. It becomes all confused. We'd be half mad if that was our arrangement. But fortunately, we can insert one thing, and when our attention goes to one area, all the other senses will fade into the distance. For example, if you take a walk with an ornithologist, a person who is experienced in identifying all the birds, you will hardly notice them, but the ornithologist will say, oh, that song belongs to this bird. Do you hear it? Can you catch its pitch? Can you delight in it as I delight in it? And you might say, well, until you pointed it out, I hardly noticed it. But now that you point it out, I see how sweet it is. And then he'll say, do you see how it's different from this sound? So we have the opportunity, really, of engaging the external senses, not so that consciousness can flow out toward the objects with a view to get happiness, but simply with a neutral view of appreciation. And when we see that, and when we're able to catch the source of it underneath it, when we're used to that, then instantaneously, effortlessly, internal joy raises. It comes up within us. It's inescapable. And when we see that we are moving then in the sea of bliss everywhere, without any distractions, without any neutralizations, putting in doubt and fear, putting it, for example, the latest events in international news and allowing ourselves to allowing these things to upset our natural equilibrium of mind, then we have removed the grieving side of things. And what remains is the extra insight to see, there's something special there, something elevating. Now, given a choice, a few seconds running by like a train, giving the choice, would I like to insert in every single opportunity called a second this immense rapture of joy? Or do I want to let the mind drift into a land of negativity and depression, a dark place, a place of melancholy? And you would naturally say, most people would say, no, I would like to do the former. Unless, of course, you really, really enjoy being depressed. There are certain people in certain nations who would like to be depressed. They find their joy in complaint. And that's a peculiar part of modern human social interactions. You know, when you are stuck for conversation, maybe you want to talk about the weather or talk about your health issues or whatever it is. And it is our social convention when somebody says, "Good morning, how are you?" They don't wait to find the answer. They move on quickly. How are you? And the person who is sincerely taking the question may open his mouth to talk about all their health problems, all the domestic issues, all their difficulties in a political world or hostile world, what was there on the news and so on. And of course, if that's the case, you'll be there for hours. So, if we have this understanding of these waves, we have a great advantage. The first wave, primordial wave that can arise, we call it Akasha. Akasha is that wave system of divine grace. We can call it God's grace that produces two movements. The one movement is primarily to produce all sounds. In other words, all vibrations. All vibrations are potential sounds, and they're actual sounds when the ear catches them. And so they produce these varieties of sounds, and progressively, with a matching movement, they produce progressively the ear organs, as well as all the attachments, the necessary. And what a wonderful thing hearing is. To hear something, so many things are required. First of all, there has to be the interaction of two things. And then that carries invisibly, it makes invisible vibrations. And these come out as waves, and they're carried through a kind of space. Just like radio waves are broadcast through the electromagnetic system, wave system, this Akasha is the same kind of thing. And it carries these waves, and the air picks them up because it is equipped to tune in to that frequency and wavelength suitable for human hearing. And that makes something in the inner ear vibrate, and that then gets transferred through the nervous system to the brain. And the brain's wiring also accesses memory. And the memory says, yes, I recognize this sound. Now all this happens so quickly we hardly notice it. What a wonderful arrangement. But the next one of these faculties that slowly unfolds is technically called Vayu. And unfortunately, this is uselessly translated as air, but it produces all pressures and all skins to register them. It is containing a kind of potential energy, a kind of kinetic energy, which means that the word Vayu or wind or air gives us the impression it's dispersed everywhere. And then next to emerge would be the quality that brings colors and shapes to the eyes that catch them. And The next one will be taste and taste buds to catch them. And the last one in the series will be smells and noses to catch them. Now it's clear that farm animals, their noses will catch different things and be quite fine with them. But our noses are different. We probably won't like many of these farm animal smells, and our tastes will be different. Our taste buds will be different. Things which are objectionable to our smell and taste are enjoyed maybe nicely by other creatures. And so they're not standard. But sense objects, sounds and touches, and colors and tastes and smells are coming in. So get ready, wait. On our side then, or even on the animal side, the sense organs, ears and skin and eyes and taste buds and all these other senses, these are produced from the same base. And the same base is namely God's creative effort coming in waves, these subtle waves underneath everything. If we're able to appreciate that all the time, what will happen? Our attention will be pulled away from the manifested objects that give us grief, and they will be pulled away into a kind of joy which accompanies a basic understanding. Lord, you are there. Lord, you are there. We won't stand around and saying, maybe I'll see God once this body dies and I'll go off to heaven, and there we'll have nice cool drink there and everything will be fine. I'll get the happiness. Well, why not access it here? Because the waves are operating here. So when you look at an object or look at the body, which is also an object, then we make our first analysis. What is it that we see? 5 areas of perception and what's behind them. And progressively you can reduce each one, and each time smell alone is seen, the smell is caught by the nostrils, and even behind the nostrils or the organs we can see the same waves are operating. What appears not only as smells but also as the noses and all the organs that catch it. And so we can see that below all of these sounds and so on, we see that it is God's creative purpose, creative will, pushing things forward and outward. And nothing else is there. So from every object that is seen, by a steady process of stepping backwards to the original thing, the original source, then we land ourselves in God's grace, divine grace. And that grace is ever flowing, and to catch it is a joy. So we can start with, let's say, smell, and behind that, the taste bud, and behind the smell quality, once that's eliminated, we can get the color, or we can get, after the smell, we can get the taste, and we can get all things that are tasted, and the subtle elements behind that, and that can go, that's finished. Now what remains? What remains is the sense of color and form, the sense of light, the sense of appreciation of radiance, and when that is gone, something else is there. What is that? That is that which operates all pressures and all skins that catch it, and when that is gone, what is behind that? You can catch all vibrations and the whole space in which that operates, the whole field, if you like, of operation, the system of fields. And what is behind that? Until ultimately we come to a source that is broadcasting, as it were, these divine graces. And by doing it a few thousand times, we can get familiar with it. Like multiplication table, 12 by 12, 144, we can find very quickly by practicing this. Even a child can do it. Very easy. And what is practice? Practice is repetition. Repetition of the same thing, going over and over again until it becomes our second nature. It settles down on a habit level. And so when you review the situation, By steadily practicing millions of times, the external world will quickly be reduced to divine grace, God's grace. What we view as the world will have a transformation in it. And then we can see that this grace emerges in front of us. Of 5 levels are shown, because only 5 photographs of the world are being shown, corresponding to these 5 levels, and God's grace in 5 performances will show the 5 objects. And in the personality, God's grace produces the 5 developments ending with these sense organs. And the sense objects are there, the sense organs are there. That must be practiced. And from their own sources, namely Akasha and so on, progressively back and forward we can do it. So will that make a transformation in our life? Yes, because using this analysis we can say the nature of being essentially dissimilar to the nature of the self, says the Upanishadic commentary. That is extremely pure, absolute, and consciousness alone. In other words, your quintessential being, what we call a fundamental self, is constant. And the other things are variables. And when we see this dissimilarity, what will happen? Grief will go. Now we already mentioned the aspect of rising and setting, knowing that they're rising and setting, says the Upanishads. Creation and dissolution. And so here our Vedanta system comes in. The previous system was a Sankhya system of categories where we can trace everything back through these avenues of divine grace to their source. But the physical sense organ, the eyeball, let us say, it helps me to understand maybe what time it is at night. And we can look at that with the eyes open. But you see, when the eyes close, the clock also goes. And an inner eye, which is always there, never stopped, it continues. It's only eyes closed. What is death? Eyes closed. What is reawakening? Eyes open. You can see when the eyes are closed, another world comes on with another arrangement, and the internal organs continue. And when they also set, we're left with a deep peace, where there's no duality at all. There's nothing to see, there's nothing seen, only a sense of peace remains there. We can say later, I had a peaceful sleep. And so this is the rising and setting of the senses. And then what will be that sense of deep, deep peace which is there? We have now gotten to a wonderful source. We have gotten to the source of all the other ones, which erupt into all the varieties of things and names and forms and colors which we see, where something operates. We call this Hiranyagarbha. And Hiranyagarbha means that golden womb from which everything else comes. And this is cosmic mind. But some area of potential creativity is there in deep sleep that then carries forward where the senses operate. And we hardly notice any difference gliding across these borders. We take the waking state to be the most real because you're listening to this talk and I'm speaking in that condition. But what happens when the eyes go down? The world disappears and we glide across this border. No passport, no visa necessary. Simply going across. We hardly notice gliding. That means that every night we have a dress rehearsal for this death and there's nothing to fear. Because what is death then? Closing the eyes. This world's gone. Even for a child, when they play this peekaboo game, they're enormously amused, endlessly. Close your eyes, suddenly the whole world disappears. Open it, oh, you're there again. It's a source of constant amusement. And so, yes, it's not the end. Simply close the eyes. We can even rephrase our language. Instead of saying somebody died, we say they closed their eyes. Then what will be the world that continues? A kind of world of heavens and other entities and beings and so on, but all having the characteristic of something like a dream. What is a dream? An ephemeral state where we know things come and go. They don't stay, and where every possibility can be taken into account. What is a waking state? A very similar thing. We have conditions of change, name and form, and we know that if an elephant suddenly appears in our room and disappears, we'll rub our eyes and we won't take it very seriously. Supposing there is an elephant anyway, and it moves about and suddenly it changes into a mouse, we'll rub our eyes again and say, we can hardly believe it. So what is the characteristic of illusion? It is something that rapidly changes, that appears, that disappears. We won't take it seriously. Now see how we have taken this play of waves called the waking world seriously. And when we've taken it seriously, what do we get? Do we get joy? No. We get moments of it. But generally speaking, we get unhappiness. Unhappiness, a condition where, for the time being, we don't have any negative things operating. There are no deleterious things at that particular time. But in other moments, what happens? And so this wonderful sense of joy can be cultivated. And if you ask somebody, here's an opportunity for supreme joy versus what you normally have, then you will take it. Why not take it, therefore? A second is coming. Put something useful in it. Put something valuable in it. Put something elevating in it. Like kicking a football up. It'll come down, you kick it up again. Don't expect it not to come down. The law of nature will say, yes, it will go up, it'll go against gravity, and then it'll come down again. Yes, this is true. But don't allow it to stay there. You kick it up again. You rehearse that 1,000 million times. Elevating the mind, elevating the mind. As soon as you see it come down, catch it. I see you're down. Push up again, push up again, push up. Play a game like that. It's a game where a number of people use a ball, and the idea is not to drop it. You pass it around, pass it around, pass it around, make it quite difficult, and don't allow it to fall on the floor. So in relation to the waking and the sleep states, the rising and setting of the sense organs, we can recharacterize it like that. The external organ setting, the internal organ is still shining. And the technical term which we are using normally from our present standpoint is dreams. But the philosophical term, as I said, is Hiranyagarbha, cosmic mind. The cosmic mind that sends these broadcast waves out everywhere. And when this cosmic mind itself is dropped, then what we call the Atman, or the self, or the divine, or that supreme principle, it stands undiluted. And it doesn't have any pluses or minuses in it. It is one without a second. And for this reason, it is peace itself, because it is existence itself, and consciousness itself, and bliss itself. And in our Vedanta philosophy, the highest principle, no matter where it is. Well, the where isn't even a word that will accurately describe it. We have to use these convenience terms. So that principle in you is one with it. This is our fundamental principle in Vedanta. And it's very simple. There's only one principle. We call it Brahman. And the Atman is one with this. The self is one with this. And this world of changing forms is what we call Mithya. These are the only three principles. There can be nothing more simpler than this. But what makes us feel it as an estranged principle, and what makes us struggle, is because we don't really understand it. Our gut tells us something different. And what is our purpose? What is the game that we should play? Is to get out of that and understand the changing nature of these. And then to change our thinking. So the ordinary person who's not acquainted or familiar with these scriptural points of view, then they'll harshly jump to a conclusion about the world and repeat a mantra over and over again. Oh, I am dead, what a pity, save me, when they come to death, or even the prospect of it. And then we run to the doctors for injections and so on and so forth to save our life. And the insurance company, if this happens, if that happens, securing money, that's what we normally do. But understanding this rising and setting is the reversal of this, complete reversal of it. And so in relation to the waking and sleeping states, we call it rising and setting. And this is helpful for us. And the one is miscalled a dream, but it's actually the connection with the cosmic mind. And one is called dream asleep, and it's actually a connection with the potentiality, the creative potentiality of life. And so the commentary goes on, for the constantly uniform nature of the self being unchangeable, the self, and when we say self, we mean divine self, the self cannot be the cause of sorrow. So who can inflict sorrow upon a unity? When the totality is there, unless a second totality comes with a hammer, you can't cause any pain. It is called its constant joy. So that when you see this totality alone, when you see this oneness alone, then you'll get this joy, and that is the path to it. So when we say way to joy, we are saying do a devolutionary process. Step back from where you are and find out what's behind, until you get it. And ultimately you'll get a unity. And there can be no sorrow in unity. It is all one. Now this kind of totality leads us to some very controversial conclusions. So there's a great scientific argument which talks about evolution, and there's a theistic argument that talks about creation, and you find people in a constant battle. Do you believe in creation or evolution? Well, my answer might be a little unusual. I do not believe in creation. I believe in creative movements, no doubt. And I do not believe in evolution because I believe in totality. A totality, well, you can't really have anything else. So my example of quotient, and I'll do it once more, is something like this. Supposing, it's a story of course, supposing you have some frogs who are interested in understanding a little bit of science. These frogs don't question whether frogs can be scientifically analytical or anything like that. These are just a story. It's just a story. And being frogs, they swim in water, and that's their environment. And they decide this will be their laboratory in the water. And they want to discover what is the geometric shape, which we call a cone. And so they get a professor, please will you take this cone and lower it in the water so that we may observe it and study it and take notes on it and collect data and discuss what is it and what is its nature and what is its behavior. How does it change in time? So they all have stopwatches and they all have waterproof papers and pens and so on. And they start the stopwatch, please release now. Something like a point arrives. Why? Because they are dimensionally deficient. They can't look up, they can't look down. Their vertical vision is denied to them. They can only see horizontally. And what they see is a point, and you cannot measure a point. And so they're happy to observe it and note the time. Mr. Cohn was born at 6 o'clock this morning. And then as the professor lowers the cone, a remarkable thing happens. Mr. Point today evolved by 10 o'clock. It evolved into a circle, and we have already measured the circumference of it. It's a remarkable thing that such a small thing, so subtle, can evolve into such a shape. And then as they study it over time, they take note of how this cone is evolving from a point to a circle, to a bigger circle, to an enormous circle, to something like a pot-bellied person. And then ultimately, of course, the cone disappears, and all they're seeing with their horizontal vision is, oh, the cone disappeared. We regret to announce at 6 p.m. poor Mr. Cone died. Now let's go back to the laboratory and discuss what happened, and discuss when will this and where will this cone reincarnate. Well, from the description, from the knowledge of the cone, the totality of it, you are aware. A cone was never a point, nor was it a succession of evolving circles. It was a totality. And once you know the totality, you know it doesn't change in time and it doesn't occupy any space. That's the analogy. And so in a unity, there can be no misery, there can be no fear, there can be no second to argue with or debate with. And it's to get that unity of existence all the time. Now we have 4 methods to do this, of course. And the general method is to see these subtle forces going by, one by one, go into them until you get this unity of existence. And this is referring to this text I just quoted from Kathopanishad, the rising and setting. You see the similarity between that which never changes and the rising and setting of objects because of the rising and setting of the sense organs. And consciousness that is our birthright. Yes, we can set it in a poised condition systematically, scientifically. And this is called spiritual growth, and this is called spiritual discipline. How do we do it? We do it only through this process by looking at the world in a completely different way. When we're able to disseminate between one thing and another, this is called Jnana Yoga. This is called this science of discernment. And if you want to add sweetness, then you say, the only thing I see is these divine creative waves. And these waves are simply love. And they belong to Supreme Lover. And I can worship this because that is lovable, because it gives freely everywhere and flows everywhere and doesn't ask for a return, and is always guiding me, and is always befriending me, and is always full of knowledge and wisdom. It knows what to do, and it sets the crooked path straight before me, with my effort being very small. One step toward it creates 1,000 steps toward me. What a beautiful lover who digests my food constantly, pumps my heart all the time, and gives me all the resources I require for self-discovery to play the game of waves. This is called Bhakti Yoga. And for devout worshippers, they will like that. But then we can't all the time be doing this. We can't all the time be somebody of keen intellect, constantly dedicated to this. And then, of course, there is Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, meditation, where we can sit in a dedicated way. But who will sit and meditate the whole day? So normally there would be some avenue for earning a living and for acting, and even the most passive person will need to act for basic needs. What we do with all that energy called activity, will we waste it in stress? And stress occurs when we are future orientated, we want a result somewhere. And the highest avenue, according to the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, is offering the fruits, renouncing the effects, because they do not belong to you. Put them back to the owner in a sweet offering of love and thanks. All this energy you gave me, I spent it here, I spent it there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to return all the effects and results of this energy and bring it back to the real owner. It's like the sun supplying us with energy. We don't have energy of our own. We're all running on bottled sunshine. and we don't give it a second thought. And so, you see, doing all the activities that we can with no anxiety or tension whatsoever is called karma yoga. And so these 4 avenues are open to us in order to repeat this process of discovery all the time. And when I live in this present moment with the sense of unity behind everything, I will live in a state of continuous joy and rapture. And I will see all these waves as a play, a game of life, not to be taken as seriously. And I will never confuse myself as an actor with the part. The actor-prophet complex will go from me, which is orientating all things back to a reference point of I, an I which is mortal and has a fear of death and doesn't understand that so-called death is just closing the physical eyes. That's all, nothing more, nothing less. And so with these few comments, I think we leave it off for the time being. So thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.